They gave me a folding chair at Thanksgiving, then toasted to real legacy without looking my way. Name's Caleb, 50, quiet co-founder of a firm they thought didn't exist. The Montblanc pen they ignored? It hadn't stopped moving since 2015. Ever wondered what silence sounds like? When it signs last? They laughed when I stepped into the room, coat still damp, umbrella in one hand, and a bottle of Pinot Noir in the other. The kind with a handwritten label from a little place outside McMinnville, Oregon. The sort of wine I brought because I liked it, not because it made a statement. Sean didn't even pause his sentence. Vanessa barely tilted her head. I placed the wine on the sideboard next to a tray of smoked trout canapes that no one touched. No one said welcome, either. My mother used to say I had a gift for vanishing. That night, I used it. I let them carry on, uninterrupted, as if I hadn't walked in at all. It was Thanksgiving, 2023, and the Reese family was gathered at Sean's investment property just outside Seattle, though if you asked him, he'd call it a curated asset for future development. To me, it looked like an overpriced craftsman house with too much staging, gauzy curtains no one closed, candles that smelled like bergamot, and flower arrangements tall enough to block eye contact. Outside, the drizzle came sideways. Inside, the mood was carefully manufactured. My name wasn't on the table. That didn't surprise me. I'd never been part of the family group chat. Vanessa, of course, had a hand-drawn calligraphy card. So did Sean. And even my parents, Martin and Sylvia, who now leaned over their wine glasses discussing the gala Vanessa had hosted at the Whitney. I pulled a folding chair from the hallway, just like last year. "Still doing spreadsheets?" Sean asked as I settled in. His tone was casual, performative. I gave him a polite smile. I'd learned years ago that direct answers just extended the conversation. Vanessa, seated 2 seats away and wearing something that looked like silk but sounded like plastic, chimed in. "You always did love your little numbers, Caleb. Honestly, you should have come into PR. You'd be great with analytics." "Thanks," I said, taking a sip of tap water. The wine hadn't made it around to me. The dinner had the cadence of a panel discussion at a tech summit. Sean spoke of cap rates and escrow timelines. Vanessa dropped names like Chanel and the mayor's people. My parents offered reactions on cue, proud that 2 of their 3 children had apparently built something. I wondered what Miriam would have said if she'd been sitting next to me. Probably something dry, like this feels like a TED Talk with turkey. When the turkey arrived, I realized I had no appetite. Maybe it was the smell of clove in the air. Maybe it was Sean's 3rd retelling of how Stellan Equity had offered a preliminary commitment on a $10 million capital infusion for his next phase in Bellevue. I set down my fork. "That deal goes through Monday?" Sean looked at me like I'd asked him to explain gravity. "Yeah, final review Monday. Lawyers, signatures, the usual grind." I said, dabbing the corner of my mouth with a napkin. "Do you know who holds the final signature on that term sheet?" The room paused. Not entirely, just enough that even the caterer, a man in an apron who pretended he'd slow-roasted the potatoes himself, looked up. Sean laughed. "Someone with more than a folding chair, I'm guessing." I didn't laugh. Martin muttered something about leverage. Sylvia poured herself more Pinot, presumably from the bottle Sean brought. Something French, no doubt. I checked my phone under the table. A notification had just come through. Signature authority confirmed. Final draft sent. Meeting, Monday 9 a.m. The room returned to its rhythm. Toasts were made. Vanessa raised her glass, to legacy, and my father added, "Some of us carry the family name forward." I let them. I let it all wash over me, their assumption that I was still figuring things out, still sitting in my folding chair at the corner of the table. What they didn't know, what they hadn't bothered to ask, was that I'd joined Stellan as a silent partner back in June. Not flashy, not loud, just efficient. There's something to be said for being underestimated, for walking into a room where no one sees you and quietly signing the paper that holds the house up. And when it comes to family, sometimes the most powerful move is to show up. With a bottle of wine no one drinks, and a signature no one saw coming. Before they ignored me, I learned how to be invisible. I wasn't born with that instinct. It came from practice. The kind of practice you develop when no one's looking out for you, and no one thinks they need to. I still remember the fluorescent hum at SeaTac Airport the day I landed back from Yale, spring 2015. I'd taken the red-eye because it was cheap, and because it felt like the right thing to do. The gate was half empty. No one came. Not my father. Not Sean. Vanessa had sent a text that said, "Hope your flight's smooth, Caleb," with a confetti emoji. My cab driver's name was Mark. He smelled faintly of mint and drove in silence until he noticed the Yale tag on my duffel. "Must have been some school," he said. "It was," I replied. But I didn't feel like I was returning home, more like I'd been quietly reassigned. Mom had just had a stroke. It wasn't the dramatic kind, just a small cerebral warning shot. Enough to disorient her speech, enough to make Dad more impatient than usual. So I moved back, temporarily, or so I told everyone, including myself. The temporary stretched. I found a sublet near the U District, a studio with peeling gray paint and a futon that pretended to be a bed. I told myself I'd stay 6 months. I stayed 5 years. The blueprint began there. Most nights, I walked to the 24-hour cafe near campus. Laminated tables, always smelled of burnt espresso and old ambition. I'd bring printouts of startup cap tables I pulled from old clients, and I'd mark them up with a red pen. The companies were always the same. Fast talkers, no follow-through. Products that dazzled on pitch decks, burned cash by quarter 2. I didn't judge. I offered to help. The founders never had time, but they always needed money. So I made deals. I'd fix the burn rate, restructure the convertible notes, align investor incentives. In return, I asked for a silent equity clause. No voting power, no board seat, just presence. They didn't realize presence was power. Miriam did. She saw what I was doing, even when she didn't understand it. "Why don't you just launch your own firm?" she'd asked once, while folding laundry. "Or at least put your name on a door somewhere." "Quiet capital works better," I said. She folded a t-shirt slowly. "You don't take risks, Caleb. You hedge them. That's not living." She left 2 months later. She took her boots, her books, and the mug we both liked. She left the Mont Blanc pen my mother gave me, the one she said looked too stiff for everyday use. I kept the pen in the back of a drawer, one of those felt-lined drawers people use for watches and spare cufflinks. I didn't have either. Just that pen. Black barrel, gold trim, slightly heavy in the hand. I signed my first acquisition with it. Fall 2019. A struggling logistics app out of San Jose. They had burned through $3 million with nothing but back-end code and a brand guide. I brought in a product lead, cut the marketing team in half, and merged the IP with another firm's delivery routing. 6 months later, the merged entity got a Series B. My signature sat on all 3 documents. I didn't celebrate. There was no champagne, no clapping, no "we did it" in a glass conference room. Just me, a flickering lamp, and the click of the pen cap locking into place. By 2020, Stellan Equity existed, but not on LinkedIn. It wasn't a logo or an office suite. It was a structure. Delaware layers, advisory proxies, irrevocable trusts. I had influence in 14 firms. None of them mentioned my name. and that was fine. People asked what I did. I said, freelance finance work. That usually ended the conversation. I got used to silence. More than used to it, I mastered it. Because silence makes people sloppy. They underestimate the person who doesn't rush to fill the room. They forget to wonder who actually signs what. It's not that I didn't feel anything. I just learned to channel it differently. Every time Sean posted about another exclusive investor night, I ran a simulation. Every time Vanessa made a speech about building legacy, I opened a new shell company. Not to compete, but to structure, to anticipate. And every time I missed a holiday dinner, I made a note in my ledger. Who sent an invite? Who followed up? Who didn't even notice? Now, it's Sunday night, 2023. I'm standing in my condo, lights low, fridge humming behind me. The same drawer opens with the same quiet resistance. Inside, the pen gleams under warm light. Tomorrow, it signs something bigger. $10 million. They won't clap for that either. But the ink will dry just the same. They forgot to put my name on the guest list. Again. The front desk clerk looked up from his tablet, brows pinched in polite confusion. Do you have an appointment, sir? I'm expected, I said, offering a soft smile and my driver's license. He typed slowly, eyes flicking back and forth between screens. Then the puzzled pause. A finger taps the edge of the desk. I don't see a Caleb Reese. That's all right, I replied, sliding a slim white envelope toward him. Try the contact at Stellan Equity. He blinked, hesitated, then stood and walked to a side terminal. From where I stood, I could see my reflection in the chrome elevator doors. Gray coat, calm face, nothing flashy. The kind of man you don't notice until you realize he's been there the whole time. 2 minutes later, a security guard approached. She looked down at her tablet, then back at me with new eyes. This way, Mr. Reese. Funny how quickly tone changes with credentials. The elevator ride to the 26th floor was silent, except for the rain tapping the building's sides. Seattle rain never crashes. It lingers, like memory. I signed the visitor log as C. Reese. It was already 8:42 a.m. Through the frosted glass walls, I saw them arrive. Vanessa came in first, latte in one hand, sunglasses perched like a crown she forgot to remove. Sean followed, phone pressed to his cheek, gesturing sharply. My father adjusted his tie even though no one asked him to. Sylvia had on her cranberry blazer. Thanksgiving colors again. They walked right past where I stood. No one looked twice. Renee greeted them with folders and firm nods. Final review is printed and bound, she said. Signature folio is ready. She caught my eye across the hallway and gave a subtle nod. We'd rehearsed this. At 8:59, I stepped through the glass door. The room wasn't large, just long. Chrome-framed chairs, a minimalist table, untouched coffee cups lined in a row. The city spread behind them like a grayed-out map. No one spoke right away. Vanessa turned first. Her eyes narrowed like she was solving a memory. Sean blinked. You're early for lunch, he said with a chuckle. Or did they finally start letting consultants sit in on real meetings? I didn't respond. I placed my leather folio on the table, opened it, and slid the top document forward. Vanessa leaned in, her smile slipped. Sean stepped closer, reading the name at the bottom of the first page, then the second, then the signature line. He cleared his throat. I think there's been some kind of mix. There hasn't, Renee said, arriving beside me with the official packet. Her tone was smooth. Practiced. Sean's voice hardened. Who authorized this? I spoke softly. You did. Or rather, your proposal did. You just never checked who Stellan Equity designated as final authority. I tapped the line with my finger. Caleb Reese, managing member. The silence stretched like cooling metal. I let it. "Sean," I said, still calm, "you once told me if I ever got into real deals, you'd eat your Rolex." He glanced down instinctively at the gold watch on his wrist. Same one from 2018. Still ticking. "I don't remember saying that." "I do," I said. "Some memories were better than others." Vanessa crossed her arms. "This is absurd. You don't even run anything." "No," I replied. "I structure things." I sat, opened the contract summary, and turned it toward them. Page 6 has the terms. Non-negotiable. You'll want to look at the penalty clauses. Martin spoke up, brittle with confusion. "Are you telling us you're the investor?" "I'm telling you," I said gently, "you're part of something I've built." Sean scoffed. This is ridiculous. You live in some shoebox and shuffle numbers. We've been dealing with real firms." "Every clause," I interrupted. "Every comma. Mine." Vanessa's voice cracked just slightly. "You're the one they've been emailing?" I folded my hands. "Since January." The clock on the wall clicked to 9:03. Outside, the drizzle blurred into the window's edges, streaks against skyline. The room had stopped pretending it understood itself. It had started with no name on the guest list. Now, the deal couldn't close without me. They invited my parents to witness a victory. They didn't know the trophy was me. The chandelier above the conference table flickered slightly. An LED stutter, barely noticeable unless you were already watching for the seams. I was. The room was quiet, a kind of hush that didn't ask permission. Just settled. It was 10:15 a.m. The coffee had long since gone cold, but no one reached for a refill. Outside, the city softened under mist. In here, the air held a different kind of fog, one made of confusion, dawning awareness, and paper. Renee stood to my left, calm, distributing thick signature packets, one for each chair. She didn't need to explain anything. The first page was simple. Amended terms. Stellan equity transaction. My name was printed top right. Managing member, legal authority, oversight. Sean's fingers twitched against the armrest. He didn't open the packet yet. He didn't need to. His instincts were already screaming. Martin was the first to speak. "So this is happening?" He glanced between the folder and me, eyes narrowed behind his wire-framed glasses. "You're running this?" "I've been running it," I said, not unkindly. Sylvia's mouth parted as if to say something, then closed again. I turned to Sean. "Shall I walk everyone through the summary?" "I'll bet it's colorful," he said dryly. "It's structured," I replied. I flipped my own folder open and spoke evenly, like I'd done 100 times before in other rooms, to other men who didn't share my last name. Item 3.2. Equity reallocation. Stellan assumes 61% stake in the Cascade Bay project. Vanessa blinked. How did they approve that?" I gestured to the attorney on the monitor, seated stiffly in a law office somewhere in San Francisco. "Mr. Harrow, can you confirm the sequence of authority?" "Confirmed," he said through the screen. "Transfer of ownership was completed in phases beginning Q3 last year. Mr. Caleb Reese was designated final signatory per corporate charter revision in March." Sean made a sound, something between a laugh and a groan. "I told you we should have read those quarterly amendments," Vanessa hissed at him. "You mean the ones you skimmed before the gala?" Sean stood, pacing 2 steps, then stopped. "You tricked us. This isn't what we agreed to." I closed my folder. "It's exactly what the documents stated," I said. "You just didn't read them." Vanessa leaned in. "Okay, Caleb, look. This is obviously clever. I'll give you that. But we're family. You could have told us. We could have worked together." "You mean like Thanksgiving?" I asked softly. She looked away. Martin cleared his throat. This feels personal. It's not, I replied. But it is accurate. Sean slammed his hand against the table. You can't just erase me from my own project. You're not being erased. You're being restructured, I said. As of today, you'll remain a shareholder, but operational control moves to oversight. Whose oversight? He barked. I tapped my name on the cover. Mine. Renee stepped in, flipping to section 6.4. Due to evidence of non-disclosure and internal loans against projected assets, board control was triggered. Sean turned crimson. Those loans were standard bridge gaps. Unreported, I corrected, and not so standard when leveraged across 3 properties you personally guaranteed without informing shareholders. Sylvia's voice cracked. Sean, is that true? He looked at her, then at Martin, and finally down. I waited. Vanessa shifted in her seat, trying to find footing. Okay, maybe we fumbled a few things. But is this your way of punishing us? No, I said. This is my way of protecting the investment. Martin bristled. You think we don't know what we're doing? You think paperwork is hiding, I answered, looking him in the eye. But real men don't hide behind family favors either. His jaw twitched. That hit somewhere. You once called me the quiet one, I continued. Turns out silence accrues interest. Sylvia spoke again, her voice barely above breath. Why didn't you ever tell us? I paused. Because, I said slowly, you only respect what you think you built. And I hadn't come to beg for that. I opened my briefcase one final time and slid a sealed envelope across the table. It bore the letterhead of Harrow and Liska, embossed in silver. You'll want your lawyers to read section 9.3 before you sign. Martin didn't move. Sean sat rigid, fists clenched. Vanessa stared at the envelope like it might explode. I stood. Outside, the mist had lifted just enough for the skyline to come into focus. The chandelier above flickered again. But this time, no one looked up. My family taught me how to endure humiliation, so I taught them how to read footnotes. The light in the boardroom had shifted. What was once morning mist was now clear, soft daylight diffused through tall glass. The skyline beyond had sharpened, too. No longer a blur of outlines, but towers, cranes, and the quiet machinery of a city that built without fanfare. Inside, we were still. The folders remained open, legal counsel's voice slow and deliberate, like a steady tick on a clock that refused to skip a second. Section by section, clause by clause. Renee moved between seats with quiet efficiency, highlighting key paragraphs, pointing gently with a capped pen. There were no more raised voices, no interruptions, just the rustle of pages and the occasional, reluctant sigh. Sean hadn't spoken in 10 minutes. His right leg bounced, agitated under the table. The pen between his fingers tapped once against the hardwood before stilling. At last, he leaned forward and signed. His signature dragged slightly at the end, like the pen didn't want to follow through. Vanessa hesitated longer. Her hand hovered over the page. When she did sign, it was quick, almost careless, and she closed the folder as if sealing away something unpleasant. She didn't look up. Sylvia took the pen from Renee with trembling fingers. Her hands were usually so careful, used to tying ribbons around perfect gifts, smoothing napkins at dinner parties. Now they shook as she initialed 3 spots and signed once, slowly. I couldn't see her eyes behind her glasses, but I noticed the way she gripped the pen long after she was done. Martin, seated beside her, didn't hesitate. His name landed on the page with a firmness that felt more like resignation than control. I waited for silence before speaking. The conditions of breach are outlined in section 10.1, I said. You'll find the liquidation rights are clear. The media blackout is enforceable, and the board, I paused, will be restructured immediately. Sean shifted in his seat. Vanessa sat rigid. Martin exhaled hard. Sylvia adjusted her scarf, though it hadn't moved. I didn't linger. This isn't a punishment, it's a correction. There's no need for press, no need for drama, no lawsuits, unless you initiate them, which I wouldn't recommend. My voice was even, not cold, just final. Compliance buys you privacy. I think you'll find that valuable. Vanessa let out a short laugh, empty of humor. So that's it? We just go along? You already did, I replied. Today made it official. Sean clenched his jaw. You could have said something, given us a chance. I gave you years, I said. You just didn't recognize them as such. No one argued. Then I spoke the one line I'd written and rewritten in my mind 100 times. Never angry, never shouting, just waiting for its moment to land. From now on, you don't get to define who I am. That part's done. Sylvia bowed her head slightly. Martin leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms, like a man who knew this version of the story wouldn't be written in the family newsletter. Renee began collecting the signed pages, double-checking initials, her presence calm and constant, like the hum of a machine that had always worked, even when no one noticed it. I stood, slowly. For the first time, I felt taller than Sean without needing to move toward him. Vanessa looked up at me. Her expression was unreadable. Martin stood next, straightening his blazer as though dressing for a part he no longer played. Sylvia rose last, her chair pushing back gently. She hesitated near the window, touching the glass with her fingertips as if trying to understand how we'd gotten here. And then, just as they prepared to leave, folders closed, pens capped, silence filling every gap. I spoke once more. This time gently, as if offering a thought rather than a verdict. The nameplate outside says Stellan Equity. It always did. You just never walked close enough to read it. No one responded. Renee opened the door for them. They filed out slowly, not defeated, but rewritten. I remained behind. Outside the window, sunlight caught the edge of a nearby building. It shimmered like a silver thread stitched between floors, binding things not in anger, but in clarity. They'd come to win something. They just hadn't expected the prize to change shape. Closure isn't loud. It's a door closing without anyone hearing it. 3 weeks later, the elevator opened directly into the executive suite I rarely used. Floor-to-ceiling glass looked out over Seattle's night skyline. Pale gold lights traced freeways, and the black line of the Pacific stretched beyond it, constant and patient. Dinner had no theme, no banner, just place settings of silver on navy linen, a white menu with no logo, and the kind of quiet that made people speak more softly without realizing it. I didn't stand to greet them. Instead, I nodded from my seat at the head of the table as they entered. They all came. Sean arrived first, still tanned from somewhere expensive, dressed to remind people he was doing fine. Vanessa wore a blazer that likely cost more than the entire catering staff's week of wages. Martin and Sylvia followed, slower now, Sylvia holding her husband's arm like a habit rather than a need. They looked around the suite like they were unsure what to call it. Boardroom didn't apply. Home certainly didn't either. The room existed in that strange corporate luxury zone, designed to impress but not to comfort. They hesitated before sitting. No one moved toward a chair until I gave a small nod. The gesture landed like a ripple on still water. We ate. There were no speeches, no toasts, only the soft clinking of silverware and the faint notes of a jazz piano drifting in from the sound system. Renee moved in and out, adjusting courses and refilling glasses, her face a practiced calm. Staff referred to me as Mr. Reese, which they hadn't heard before. Sean broke the silence first. "You always had a taste for clean design," he said, gesturing vaguely to the room. "Minimalist. Classic?" I gave a small smile, polite but closed. Sylvia added, "Even when you were little, you'd line up your crayons in color order. Remember that?" I didn't, but I nodded anyway. Vanessa offered her own. "I used to say you were the secret architect of the family." I wasn't. Not then. But now, maybe. These weren't olive branches, just soft edits, revisions of a story they'd once written without me, now trying to pencil me back in without acknowledging the erasure. I let them. There was nothing to gain by pressing against their attempts at memory. History folds easiest when you let it. After dessert, lemon tart, lightly burnt at the edges the way I liked it, Martin asked, "So, what comes next? You taking on more?" I sipped from my glass. "Nothing I have to explain." They laughed, unsure if it was a joke. I didn't correct them. When the meal ended, I thanked the team quietly. Renee gave me a small nod before escorting everyone to the elevator. No one lingered. Once the doors slid shut, I stepped onto the balcony alone. 42 stories up, the wind felt cleaner, like it hadn't passed through anyone else before reaching me. Below, the city moved. Cars, ferries, a few blinking construction cranes. Quiet ambition built into light. My phone buzzed. New acquisition confirmed. Transition team ready. I leaned against the balcony rail, the same way I used to lean against the kitchen counter in my old studio apartment, watching a cracked window sway slightly in the breeze. Some things don't change, even when everything else does. I tapped back one message. Transfer 4% to Girls in STEM Seattle. Keep my name off. Then I powered the phone down. No one clapped, no one stood, no one offered a plaque or speech. And that was exactly how I wanted it. I watched the lights blink across the harbor, one by one, steady and without apology. Some people build empires with brass and fire. Me? I built mine in silence. The room emptied, the night softened, and I stood alone. No applause, no fanfare, just peace. Funny how the silence I once resented became the very thing that carried me home. Sometimes family doesn't see you until the paperwork does. But dignity isn't something they hand you. It's something you build, clause by clause, moment by moment. And in the end, love doesn't need volume. It just needs room. If this story reminded you of a moment you've lived, or one you've kept quiet, feel free to share. I'll be here, quietly listening.